You owe us rent for living in our house, Mom. Those words from my own son made my hands shake with rage, but what I did next made him pack his bags within 48 hours. I'm so grateful you're here with me today. Stay until the very end and drop a comment telling me which country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels around the world. At 73 years old, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal a person could experience. I'd buried a husband, survived cancer twice, raised 3 children through good times and hard times, weathered financial storms and personal tragedies, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment my own son looked me in the eye and told me I was a burden living off his charity in what he called his house. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, though most people in my life have always called me Ellie. I've lived in the same beautiful craftsman-style house in Maplewood Heights for 47 years. My late husband Graham and I bought this place back in 1977 when this neighborhood was just working-class families, corner groceries, and tree-lined streets where children played until the streetlights came on. Back then, you could buy a solid family home on a teacher's salary and a nurse's income, which is exactly what we did. We raised our 3 children here, Graham and I, our oldest son Marcus, our daughter Shelby, and our youngest Robert. We painted every wall ourselves, chose every paint color together, planted every tree and flowering bush in that yard with our own hands. We fixed every broken pipe, replaced every creaky floorboard, updated every outdated fixture as money allowed over the decades. This house wasn't just property or a financial asset on some spreadsheet. It was the living, breathing story of our family. Every corner held a memory. Every room echoed with laughter and tears and the ordinary moments that make up a life well lived. Graham passed away 8 years ago from a sudden heart attack. One morning, he was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper at our kitchen table, telling me about an article on vintage cars he wanted to show me, and by that afternoon, he was gone. The grief nearly destroyed me. I spent months moving through the house like a ghost, seeing him everywhere, hearing his voice in every room. But I held on. I held on because this house held his memory in every corner, every photograph on the wall, every piece of furniture we'd chosen together. The kitchen where he'd make his terrible Sunday pancakes that the kids pretended to love. The back porch where we drink coffee every morning and watch the sunrise, planning our day, talking about everything and nothing. The bedroom, where we'd shared 42 years of marriage, of whispered conversations in the dark, of comfort and companionship through all of life's challenges. After Graham passed away, my children rallied around me for a while. Shelby visited every week, bringing groceries and helping with yard work. Robert called regularly from Seattle, where he'd moved for work. And Marcus, my oldest, seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being. He'd stop by to check on me, fix things around the house, make sure I was eating properly and taking care of myself. For the first year or 2 after losing Graham, I truly felt supported by my children, grateful for the family we'd built together. But Marcus had always been different from his siblings. Even as a child, he'd wanted the biggest piece of cake, the best toy, the most attention. He was competitive to a fault, always comparing what he had to what others had, always wanting more. As he grew older, that competitiveness transformed into something else. Ambition mixed with entitlement. Drive mixed with selfishness. I'd loved him fiercely anyway, the way mothers do, making excuses for his behavior as just being confident and driven, telling myself he'd grow out of it, that he was just finding his way in the world. Marcus had gone into real estate development after college and, by his account, had done quite well for himself. He drove a leased Mercedes that he talked about like he owned it outright. He wore expensive designer suits and Italian leather shoes. He belonged to an exclusive golf club and was always name-dropping about his investment properties and business deals and important connections. He projected success so aggressively that most people never thought to question whether it was real. But I'm his mother. I could see the cracks in the facade. The way he dodged certain questions about his business, the vagueness when discussing specific properties or deals, the subtle desperation behind the bragging. Still, I kept my observations to myself. What parent wants to believe their child is struggling, especially when that child works so hard to convince everyone otherwise?
2 years ago, everything changed when Marcus showed up at my door with a woman named Vivian Ashworth. Not his wife, mind you. His wife, Claire, had divorced him just 6 months earlier after discovering not one but multiple affairs throughout their 15-year marriage. Claire had been a sweet woman, a kindergarten teacher who truly loved Marcus despite his flaws. Their divorce had been bitter and expensive, and Marcus had lost their house, a significant portion of his assets, and the respect of many mutual friends who'd sided with Claire. No, Vivian was his mistress turned girlfriend, the woman he'd been seeing behind Claire's back for a year before the divorce.
Mom, I want you to meet Vivienne, Marcus had announced that first day, his arm around her waist possessively, like he was showing off a prize he'd won. She's the one. We're serious. We're moving in together. I'd been polite, welcoming even, offering them tea and asking Vivienne about herself. Though something about this woman made my skin prickle with unease. There was a hardness beneath her charming exterior, a coldness in those green eyes when she thought no one was watching. The way she assessed my home with calculating eyes, walking through the rooms like she was mentally cataloging every piece of furniture, every decoration, every valuable item, like she was already planning how to rearrange it all, how to make it hers. "What a charming little house," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "So quaint and vintage. It has real potential." The word little had stung. My 2,400 square foot home with 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, a proper dining room, and a finished basement was hardly little. But to Vivienne, who spoke constantly about luxury condos and upscale properties, I suppose anything that wasn't brand new and ostentatiously modern seemed small. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that Marcus's real estate empire was crumbling beneath his feet. Bad investments and properties that never materialized, risky loans he couldn't repay, credit card debt mounting into the 6 figures, a lifestyle he couldn't actually afford but refused to give up because his entire identity was wrapped up in appearing successful. He'd overextended himself trying to impress Vivienne, trying to maintain the illusion of wealth and success, trying to prove he was the successful businessman he claimed to be. He was drowning in debt, facing potential bankruptcy, scrambling desperately for a way out. And that's when he'd started looking at my house differently. Not as his childhood home, not as his mother's sanctuary filled with decades of family memories, but as an asset, as property, as something that could save him from his own poor decisions. It started small, so subtly I almost didn't notice at first. 3 months after introducing me to Vivienne, Marcus began visiting more frequently. He'd show up unannounced, letting himself in with the key I'd given him years ago for emergencies. He'd walk through the rooms with a new kind of critical eye, pointing out things that supposedly needed updating, problems that supposedly needed fixing. "Mom, this kitchen is so outdated," he'd say, running his hand dismissively along the butcher block countertops that Graham had installed himself 40 years ago, sanding and sealing them with such care and pride. "These appliances are ancient. That refrigerator must be 20 years old. The stove is a dinosaur. And these cabinets, Mom, they're falling apart. The hinges are loose, the finish is worn. This whole kitchen needs to be gutted and renovated." "They work just fine," I'd reply, feeling defensive, though I wasn't entirely sure why. "Everything functions perfectly. The refrigerator keeps food cold. The stove cooks my meals. Why would I spend thousands of dollars replacing things that aren't broken?" "Because it's not about whether they work, Mom. It's about property value, about modernization, about keeping up with the neighborhood." He'd shake his head like I was being unreasonably stubborn about something obvious. "This house is worth money, but not nearly as much as it could be worth with the right updates." "In this living room," he'd continue, not waiting for my response, gesturing around at the comfortable furniture Graham and I had chosen together over the years. "Mom, nobody has carpet anymore. It's all hardwood floors now, or luxury vinyl planking.
This wall-to-wall carpeting is so 1980s. And these walls, they need fresh paint. That wallpaper accent wall is dated. The whole place needs serious renovation. Vivienne would always chime in with her honeyed voice, standing beside Marcus like they'd rehearsed this performance. It has such incredible potential, though, doesn't it, baby? The bones are good, classic craftsman architecture, solid construction. With the right updates, this could be worth so much more. We're talking 100,000, maybe 200,000 more in property value with strategic renovations. The right updates, worth so much more. Property value, investment potential. I should have heard the warning bells then, should have recognized that they weren't expressing concern about my living conditions, but rather assessing my home like it was already theirs to evaluate and price. Then came the concerned conversations about my age and health, discussions I hadn't asked for and didn't want. "Mom, you're 73 now," Marcus said one afternoon in early spring. Sitting across from me at my kitchen table, his expression arranged in practiced concern. "This house is too much for you to maintain. The yard work alone is exhausting for someone your age. The repairs that come up constantly with an older house. And these stairs, Mom, they're steep. What if you fall? What if something happens and you're here all alone? You could lie on the floor for hours before anyone found you." "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself," I'd responded firmly, irritated by his patronizing tone. "I'm 73, not 93. I walk 3 miles every morning. I do yoga twice a week. My doctor says I'm in excellent health for my age. And I have your sister Shelby 20 minutes away. I have my neighbor Dorothy next door who checks on me daily. I have friends, a community. I'm fine, more than fine."
"But are you, though?" Vivian had interjected, leaning forward with that false concern dripping from every word. "At your age, wouldn't you be more comfortable in a nice senior living community? Somewhere with people to help you, activities to keep you engaged, medical staff on site in case of emergency? My grandmother moved into one and she absolutely loves it. She has friends her own age, no responsibilities, everything taken care of for her. It's like living in a resort." The suggestion had hit me like a physical slap. "I'm not going to a nursing home," I'd said, my voice harder than I'd intended. "This is my house. This is my home. I'm staying here until they carry me out, and maybe not even then. I might just haunt the place after I'm gone." I'd meant it as a joke, trying to lighten the tension, but neither Marcus nor Vivian had laughed. Instead, I saw frustration flash across Marcus's face, quickly covered by that practiced expression of patient concern. "Mom, nobody's talking about a nursing home. These are independent living facilities, luxury retirement communities. You'd have your own apartment, your own space, but with services available when you need them. It's the smart choice for someone at your stage of life." My stage of life? As if being 73 meant I was somehow incapable of making my own decisions, managing my own home, living my own life on my own terms? Marcus had backed off that day, changing the subject when he saw my resistance hardening. But I could see the frustration in his eyes, the barely concealed impatience with my stubbornness. He'd expected me to be grateful for his concern, compliant with his suggestions, agreeable to whatever plan he was forming in his head. Instead, I was being difficult, unreasonable, refusing to see what was supposedly best for me. The visits continued through spring and into summer, but the tone shifted progressively. Marcus started bringing up finances more frequently, asking probing questions that felt invasive. "Mom, how are you really managing financially with just your Social Security and Dad's pension? This house must be expensive to maintain. Property taxes in this neighborhood have gone up significantly. The utilities, the insurance, the constant repairs old houses need. It all adds up. Are you sure you're not struggling?" "I manage just fine," I'd said, though truthfully, money was sometimes tight. My Social Security check and Graham's pension covered my basic needs, but there wasn't much left over for luxuries or unexpected expenses. I was careful with every dollar, clipped coupons, shopped sales, kept the thermostat a little lower in winter and a little higher in summer than was entirely comfortable.
but I made it work because staying in my home, maintaining my independence, was more worth than comfort or convenience. You know, if you're struggling financially, if money is tight, Vivian and I could help, Marcus had said, his voice taking on that helpful, generous tone that I would later recognize as manipulation. Mom, in fact, we've been talking about it, thinking about the future. What if we moved in here with you? We could split the expenses, help with maintenance, keep you company. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. It would solve both our problems. Both our problems? I should have asked him to clarify what his problem was. Should have questioned why a supposedly successful real estate developer needed to move into his elderly mother's house to save money. But I was so focused on maintaining my independence, so determined to prove I didn't need help, that I missed the manipulation brewing beneath the superficially generous offer. I don't think that's necessary, I'd said firmly. I appreciate the offer, but I'm doing fine on my own. I value my independence. I'm not ready to have roommates, even if they're family. Marcus had pushed a little harder. Mom, don't be so proud. There's no shame in accepting help from family. Besides, it wouldn't be forever, just until Vivian and I get settled into our next property. We're between places right now, looking at some investment opportunities. It would be mutually beneficial. Something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable, but I held firm. No, Marcus, I'm sorry, but no. I need my space, my routine. I'm not ready for that kind of change. He'd left that day with barely concealed frustration, and I hadn't heard from him for almost 2 weeks. I'd assumed he was busy with work, with Vivian, with his life. I had no idea he was planning his next move, strategizing how to get what he wanted despite my clearly stated boundaries. 6 months ago, on a Tuesday morning in early October, it happened. Marcus and Vivian showed up at my door with a full-sized moving truck idling in my driveway. "Surprise, Mom!" Marcus announced, his smile wide and enthusiastic, his arms spread like he was delivering wonderful news. "We decided to take you up on that offer. We're moving in to help you out." I stood in my doorway staring at the moving truck, feeling like the ground was tilting beneath my feet. "What offer?" "Marcus, I never made an offer. I specifically said no when you asked about this. I told you I didn't want roommates." His smile had faltered just slightly, replaced by something harder beneath the cheerful exterior. "Mom, don't be difficult. You said you were struggling financially. You need help whether you want to admit it or not. And frankly, Vivian and I need a place to stay while we're between properties. Our lease ended last week and the new condo we're buying won't be ready for a few months. The timing is perfect. This is temporary, just a few months. You're not seriously going to turn away your own son when he needs help, are you?"
The guilt hit exactly as he'd calculated it would. What kind of mother turns away her child when he says he needs help? What kind of person refuses shelter to family? He knew exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to make me feel selfish for wanting to maintain my own space and boundaries. So despite every instinct screaming at me to say no, to stand firm, to protect my sanctuary, I'd stepped aside and watched as they began unloading boxes and furniture, taking over my home without my actual consent, just my pressured compliance. "Just for a few months," I'd said weakly, watching strange furniture being carried up my front steps, "just until your condo is ready." "Of course, Mom," Marcus had assured me, patting my shoulder like I was a child who needed reassurance. "Just until we get settled. A few months at most. You'll barely know we're here." That was 6 months ago. They were still here. My few months had come and gone with no mention of the supposed condo that was supposedly almost ready. And far from barely noticing they were here, their presence had completely transformed my home and my life, and not for the better. The changes started immediately. Within the first week, Vivian had completely rearranged my living room furniture without asking permission, without even discussing it with me. "Trust me, Ellie," as she'd said, directing the furniture placement like she was staging a property for sale.
This flow is so much better, more modern, more open. You'll love it once you get used to it. My favorite reading chair, the overstuffed burgundy recliner that Graham had given me for our 30th anniversary, the chair where I'd read thousands of books, watched countless sunsets through the window, mourned my husband in the months after his death, was unceremoniously shoved into a dark corner of the room, replaced by a modern white leather sectional sofa that Vivian had brought. The sectional was stiff and uncomfortable, but it photographed well, which seemed to be Vivian's primary concern. She was constantly taking pictures of the house, posting them on social media, presenting our home as if it were hers. My kitchen became her kitchen almost overnight. She'd taken over the cabinets, pushing my dishes, the china pattern Graham and I had chosen for our wedding pattern, to the back of the highest shelves where I could barely reach them. She'd filled the prime cabinet spaces with her expensive cookware that she rarely actually used but liked to display. She'd complained loudly about my outdated and inefficient spice rack, the simple wooden one my daughter Shelby had made in high school woodshop, and replaced it with something sleek and metallic and modern that I couldn't reach without a step stool. My refrigerator was reorganized according to her preferences. My pantry was restocked with her organic, expensive brands. My comfortable kitchen, the heart of my home, where I'd cooked thousands of family meals, was transformed into a showpiece that I felt like a guest in. My daily routines, established over decades and precious to me, were completely disrupted. I had always had my coffee on the back porch at sunrise, sitting in the swing Graham had hung there, watching the birds at the feeder, starting my day in peaceful solitude. But now, Marcus and Vivian would sleep until 10 or 11 in the morning, and they complained bitterly about being woken by the sound of the screen door opening and closing. So I started making my coffee in silence, drinking it quickly in the kitchen before they woke, robbed of my morning ritual. I'd always watched my evening news at 6 o'clock, a habit from my years as a nurse working night shifts, my way of staying connected to the world. But Vivian preferred her reality shows and home improvement programs, and she would take over the living room television without asking, without even acknowledging that I might want to watch something else. When I'd tried to object, she'd looked at me with exaggerated surprise and said, "Ellie, you can watch TV in your bedroom. We need the big screen for our shows. Don't be selfish." Selfish? In my own home, wanting to watch my own television made me selfish? But the worst part, the part that truly broke something inside me, was how they talked to me. Marcus had started speaking to me like I was a child who couldn't understand basic concepts, like I was an inconvenience to be managed, rather than my mother deserving of respect. "Mom, I need you to stop leaving dishes in the sink overnight. It's unsanitary, it attracts bugs, do you understand? Wash them immediately after using them. Mom, can you please keep your bedroom door closed during the day? The hallway gets cluttered looking when we can see your personal items. We might have people over and we need the house to look presentable. Mom, we're having friends over for dinner Saturday night, so maybe you could eat earlier and spend the evening in your room? It would just be easier. We want to entertain without worrying about, you being underfoot. Eat in your room. Stay in your room. Hide yourself away so we can pretend this is our house and you're not here." In my own house, I was being asked to make myself invisible. Vivian was even worse than Marcus. She criticized everything about me, my clothes, my hair, my cooking, my friends, even the way I walked through my own house. "Ellie, I hate to say this, I really do, but you really should think about updating your wardrobe," she'd said one morning, looking at my favorite floral dress, the one I'd worn to my granddaughter's graduation, with barely concealed disgust. "Those floral prints are so dated, so elderly. You're not helping yourself look any younger. Maybe we could go shopping together. Let me help you find some more modern, age-appropriate pieces. Age-appropriate. As if being 73 meant I needed someone half my age to tell me how to dress.
Ellie, when was the last time you had your hair done professionally? That style is very, very 1990s. I know a great salon. They could do something modern with your hair, maybe add some highlights, cut it in a more contemporary style. Ellie, your cooking is lovely, really, but it's so bland, so traditional. All that salt and butter isn't good for you at your age anyway. Maybe I should take over the cooking. I can make much healthier, more flavorful meals. Ellie, when your friend Dorothy comes over, could you keep your voices down? The walls are thin, and we can hear every word of your gossip sessions. It's honestly quite distracting. Every comment felt like 1,000 tiny cuts, death by small criticisms, each one chipping away at my sense of self, at my right to exist comfortably in my own home. And the financial pressure intensified week by week, month by month. Marcus started asking increasingly invasive questions about my bank accounts, my savings, my expenses. He wanted to help me budget, to make sure I wasn't being taken advantage of by service providers, to optimize my financial situation. Mom, you're paying way too much for cable and internet. That's ridiculous for someone who barely uses it. Let me handle that for you. I can get you a better deal. Mom, your grocery bills are out of control. $60 a week for one person? You need to shop smarter, buy generic brands, use coupons more efficiently. Mom, have you thought about what's going to happen to this house when you're gone? We really should talk about estate planning, about making sure your assets are properly distributed, about protecting this property for the family. Protecting this property for the family. Translation, making sure Marcus inherited it regardless of what my actual will said. Every conversation felt like an invasion, like he was cataloging my assets and planning for my death before I was even gone, before I was even sick. He was treating me like I was already deceased, like my wishes and preferences in life were just obstacles to what he wanted. 3 weeks ago, on a cold November morning, things finally came to a head. The confrontation I'd been dreading, but somehow knew was inevitable. I'd been in the kitchen making myself lunch, a simple grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, comfort food from childhood. I was standing at the stove when Vivian walked in, looked at me like I was an intruder in what she'd apparently decided was her kitchen, and said in that voice dripping with false politeness, "Ellie, Marcus and I need to talk to you about something important, something serious. Can you come to the living room right now? We've been putting this off, but it's time to have this conversation." The living room that used to be mine, but now felt entirely like theirs, with their furniture, their decorations, their presents that had completely erased mine. I'd turned off the stove, left my half-made lunch, and followed her on shaking legs. I knew, somehow, I just knew that whatever was coming was going to change everything. I'd sat in my exiled reading chair, shoved into the corner and barely visible, while they positioned themselves on the white leather sectional like judges at a tribunal, like parents about to discipline a difficult child. "Mom," Marcus had started, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate over these 6 months. "We need to discuss the living arrangement here. We need to have an honest conversation about the reality of this situation." "What about it?" I'd asked, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking with anxiety. And anger. "It's not working out the way we planned, Marcus and I. This house is too small for 3 adults. There's not enough space, not enough privacy. Vivian and I are feeling cramped, stifled. We need room to breathe, to live our lives." I'd stared at him in complete disbelief. My 2,400 square foot house with 4 bedrooms was too small? They had an entire bedroom as their private space, plus access to every common area. They'd taken over the finished basement as their entertainment area. What more space could they need? "What exactly are you suggesting, Marcus?" I'd asked quietly, dreading the answer. Vivian had leaned forward then, her perfectly manicured hands folded in her lap, her voice taking on that syrupy, sweet tone that made my skin crawl.
We've been thinking seriously about this, Ellie, thinking about what's best for everyone involved. You've lived here a very long time. Maybe too long, if we're being honest. This house is old, it needs constant repairs, and honestly, it's not really safe for someone of your age anymore. All these stairs between floors, the old wiring that could start a fire, the uneven walkways outside where you could trip and fall. I've managed perfectly fine for 47 years. But you're not getting any younger, Marcus had interjected, his tone sharpening with impatience. None of us are. We need to be realistic about the future. We found this wonderful senior living community just 30 minutes away called Golden Mellows. They have beautiful studio apartments, full meal plans, daily activities, a whole community of people. You'd absolutely love it there, Mom. You'd have friends your own age, medical care right on site, no responsibilities or maintenance to worry about. You could actually relax and enjoy your retirement instead of struggling to maintain this big old house. The picture he was painting sounded like a nightmare to me. A small studio apartment after living in a spacious house full of memories and room to breathe. Institutional meals instead of cooking my own food. Scheduled activities instead of the freedom to live by my own rhythm. Other people deciding my routine, my schedule, my life. I'm not going to a senior home, I said as firmly as I could, though my voice shook with emotion. This is my house. Mine and Graham's house. I'm staying here. This is not negotiable.
That's when Marcus's expression had hardened, transformed from false concern to something colder, more calculating. Actually, Mom, we need to talk about that, about whose house this really is, about the reality of ownership and responsibility. My blood had run cold. What do you mean, whose house this is? This is my house. Mine. What are you talking about? Marcus had leaned back against the sectional, crossing his arms over his chest, looking at me with something between pity and condescension. I mean, Mom, that Vivian and I have been living here for 6 months now. We've been paying for groceries, for utilities, for repairs. We essentially support this household financially. We're the ones keeping this place running. And you, with all due respect, you contribute Social Security payments that barely cover the property taxes. You're not carrying your weight here. This is my house, I had repeated, my voice rising now, my hands shaking with anger. I've paid the mortgage for 47 years. Your father and I built this life here. We raised you and your siblings in this house. Every memory of your childhood is in these walls. This is my home. Vivian had actually rolled her eyes at me, a gesture so dismissive, so disrespectful that I'd been momentarily speechless. That was then, Ellie. Things change. Circumstances evolve. The reality right now, today, is that Marcus and I are the ones maintaining this property. We're the ones investing in it, improving it, keeping it running, paying the bills that keep the lights on and the heat running. You're just living here, contributing the bare minimum. The insult had been so casual, so dismissive, so cruel, that I couldn't immediately find words to respond. Marcus had stood up then, looking down at me with that expression of pity mixed with impatience, like I was being unreasonably stubborn about accepting an obvious truth. Mom, let's be realistic for once. Let's have an honest conversation. You owe us for letting you live here. If we weren't supporting you, carrying this financial burden, you'd probably have lost this place by now. You'd be in some government-subsidized senior housing or living with your daughter, imposing on her family. The absolute least you can do is be grateful and cooperative when we ask you to do something as simple as move to a place that's actually better suited for your current needs and abilities. You owe us for letting you live here. The words had echoed in my head like a scream, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My own son. My firstborn child, the baby I'd carried and birthed and nursed and raised, telling me I owed him for living in my own house. The house that I'd paid for with 47 years of mortgage payments. The house that I'd maintained through decades of repairs and updates. The house that held every memory of my life with Graham, of raising my children, of building a family and a life. I'd stood up on shaking legs, looked my son directly in the eye,
and said very quietly, very clearly, "Get out of my house." Marcus had actually laughed. He'd laughed. A short, dismissive sound that cut through me like a knife. "Mom, you're being dramatic and honestly a little ridiculous. We're just trying to have an adult conversation about what's best for everyone, about facing reality." "I said get out," I'd repeated, my voice stronger now despite the tears building behind my eyes. "Both of you, out of my house, right now. Pack your things and leave." Vivian had stood, her face flushed with anger, her perfectly composed mask slipping to show the ugliness beneath. "Fine, we'll leave, we'll go. But when you're lying on this floor with a broken hip and no one around to help you, when you're cold and alone in this big empty house, when you lose this place because you can't afford to maintain it on your pathetic fixed income, don't you dare come crying to us then. Don't you dare ask for our help then." They'd gone to their bedroom, the guest room that they had completely taken over with their furniture and belongings, and slammed the door so hard the pictures on the hallway walls shook. I'd heard them inside talking in angry, heated whispers that occasionally rose to audible phrases. "Ungrateful old woman. She'll come crawling back. Let her try to manage on her own. She'll lose this place within a year." I'd gone to my own bedroom, closed and locked the door, and for the first time in years, I'd let myself cry. Not just tears of sadness, but tears of rage and betrayal and heartbreak that felt like they would never stop. My own son, my firstborn child, the baby I'd carried and birthed and nursed and raised, telling me I owed him for living in my own house. The house that I'd paid for with 47 years of mortgage payments. The house that I'd maintained through decades of repairs and updates. The house that held every memory of my life with Graham, of raising my children, of building a family and a life. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Graham's old wind-up clock tick in the darkness, I'd made a decision. If Marcus wanted to play games about ownership and obligation, if he wanted to pretend this was his house that he was generously letting me live in, then it was time he learned exactly whose house this was. More importantly, it was time he learned that underestimating a 73-year-old woman, dismissing her, treating her like she was incompetent or helpless, was a serious mistake. A mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. Tomorrow, I would start gathering my documents. The deed to the house, the mortgage paper showing 47 years of payments, every single one made on time, the property tax records in my name, the insurance policies. Every piece of paper that proved beyond any shadow of doubt that this house belonged to Eleanor Whitfield, that I had owned it outright since 2004 when the final mortgage payment had been made, that Marcus had exactly zero legal claim to any part of it.
Tomorrow, I would remind my son that mothers aren't as helpless or as easy to manipulate as their ungrateful, entitled children sometimes think. Tomorrow, the game would change, and Marcus and his calculating girlfriend were about to learn that the biggest mistake of their lives was underestimating me. The morning after the confrontation, I woke before dawn. Sleep had been impossible, my mind racing through decades of memories, replaying Marcus's cruel words over and over like a broken record. "You owe us for letting you live here." Each repetition cut deeper, exposing layers of betrayal I hadn't fully processed in the moment. I lay in bed, listening to the familiar sounds of my house waking up. The old furnace clicking on in the basement, pushing warmth through vents that Graham had cleaned religiously every autumn. The oak tree outside my bedroom window, its bare November branches scraping against the siding in the morning wind. These sounds had been the soundtrack of my life for 47 years. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was the living archive of my entire adult life. By the time pale gray light began filtering through my curtains, I'd made up my mind completely. Marcus and Vivian weren't just going to leave my house. They were going to understand, with crystal clarity, exactly what they tried to steal from me.
They were going to face the documented, undeniable truth of their manipulation and lies. I got dressed quietly, choosing my favorite navy cardigan, the one Graham had bought me for our last Christmas together. Somehow wearing it made me feel stronger, like he was still here supporting me, giving me courage. I needed that courage today. The house was silent as I moved through it. Marcus and Vivian's bedroom door remained closed, and I was grateful for the solitude. I needed time to think, to plan, to begin gathering the evidence that would expose their scheme. I made coffee in the kitchen that Vivian had commandeered, using my old percolator instead of the fancy espresso machine she'd installed. The familiar ritual calmed my nerves. Coffee, 2 sugars, a splash of cream. The same way I'd made it for 5 decades. Some things don't need to change just because someone younger thinks they have a better way. Sitting at my kitchen table with my steaming mug, I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began making a list. Organization had always been my strength. As a nurse for 35 years, I'd learned that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. Now, that same meticulousness would help me reclaim my life. Documents together. Original house deed, in the safe. Mortgage payment records, file cabinet in the basement. Property tax receipts going back at least 10 years. Homeowners insurance policies, current and historical. Utility bills in my name, recent ones. Will and estate documents with my attorney. Graham's death certificate and probate records, proving sole inheritance. Any written communications from Marcus about a temporary living arrangement. People to contact. Bernard Morrison, my attorney. Shelby, my daughter. She needs to know what's happening. Robert, my younger son in Seattle. Dorothy, my neighbor, witness to their behavior. County Recorder's Office to get certified copies of deed. Questions to answer. What are my legal rights to evict them? How long is the legal eviction process? Can I change the locks? Should I document their presence and behavior? What if they refuse to leave? Writing it all down made it feel manageable. This wasn't just an emotional crisis. It was a problem with a solution. A puzzle I could solve with the right information and the right approach. I heard movement upstairs. Water running through old pipes, footsteps on the hardwood floors of the bedroom directly above the kitchen. They were waking up. My stomach clenched with anxiety, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had every right to be in my own kitchen, drinking my own coffee in my own house. 20 minutes later, Vivian appeared in the doorway wearing an expensive silk robe, her blonde hair perfectly styled even at 7 in the morning. She looked at me with barely concealed disdain, like I was an unpleasant stain she'd discovered on her expensive upholstery. "You're up early," she said, her tone making it sound like an accusation. "I live here," I replied evenly. "I've been waking up at this time for 50 years. She moved past me to her fancy espresso machine, pointedly ignoring the percolator I'd used. "We need to talk about yesterday, about your little outburst." "My outburst?" I set down my coffee cup carefully, not trusting myself to hold it without my hands shaking. "Is that what you're calling it?" "You got emotional and said things you didn't mean. We understand. You're under stress. Getting older is difficult, but we can't keep walking on eggshells around your mood swings." The audacity took my breath away. She was reframing the entire confrontation, making me the unreasonable one, the problem that needed managing. Before I could respond, Marcus appeared, already dressed in one of his expensive suits, ready for whatever real estate meetings or business dealings he claimed to have. He looked tired, bags under his eyes suggesting his sleep had been as troubled as mine. "Mom," he said, his voice attempting warmth but landing somewhere around forced patience. "We need to clear the air. Yesterday got heated, things were said, but we're family. We can work through this."
Work through what exactly? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. Work through you telling me I owe you rent in my own house? Work through you trying to convince me to move to a nursing home so you can take over my property?
Marcus exchanged a look with Vivian, a silent communication that excluded me entirely. That's not what's happening here, and you know it. You're twisting our words. Am I? Then please, explain to me what you meant when you said I owe you for letting me live here. I meant, Marcus said, sitting down across from me, uninvited, that we've been supporting this household financially. That's just a fact. We pay for groceries, utilities, repairs. We contribute significantly to keeping this house running. All we were suggesting is that you acknowledge that reality and be a little more flexible about future planning. Future planning, I repeated. You mean planning for when I'm dead and you inherit this house. Mom, don't be morbid. Don't be honest, you mean? I stood up, my coffee forgotten. Let me be very clear with both of you. This is my house. I own it. Your father and I paid the mortgage for 30 years. I've owned it outright, free and clear, since 2004. You have no claim to it, no rights to it, and no say in what happens to it. Vivian laughed. Actually laughed, a sharp sound that echoed in the kitchen. Ellie, ownership isn't just about whose name is on some dusty old papers. It's about who maintains the property, who invests in it, who keeps it valuable. Marcus and I have put thousands of dollars into this place in just 6 months. Thousands of dollars into what exactly? I challenged. What improvements have you made? What repairs have you paid for? Be specific. They exchanged another look, and I saw the truth in their hesitation. They'd been living here rent-free, eating food they claimed to pay for, but mostly eating my groceries, using utilities I'd always paid myself. Their thousands of dollars was fiction, a story they'd told themselves to justify their entitlement. We're not going to argue about finances at 7 in the morning, Marcus said, standing abruptly. We'll discuss this later, when everyone is calmer and thinking more rationally. I'm perfectly rational, I said to his retreating back. Maybe, for the first time in months, I'm seeing the situation with complete clarity. They left the kitchen without another word, and minutes later I heard the front door close, Marcus's Mercedes starting in the driveway. Going to work or going somewhere to strategize, I wasn't sure which. But their absence gave me the window of opportunity I needed. I went immediately to the basement, to the old filing cabinet that Graham and I had kept important documents for decades. The metal cabinet was dented and scratched, painted an ugly shade of green that Graham had always meant to repaint but never got around to. But it was organized, every file labeled in my careful handwriting or Graham's blocky print. The folder marked House Original Purchase was thick with papers yellowed by time. I pulled it out carefully, my hands trembling slightly as I opened it on the workbench Graham had built down here for his woodworking projects. There it was, the original deed to 847 Oakmont Drive, Maplewood Heights, dated September 15th, 1977, purchased by Bram Alexander Whitfield and Eleanor May Whitfield for the sum of $45,000, which had seemed like an enormous amount of money back then. Both our names on the deed, our signatures young and optimistic, starting our life together in this house where we'd planned to raise our family and grow old together. I traced Graham's signature with my finger, feeling the slight indentation in the paper where he'd pressed down with the pen. He'd been so proud that day, proud that we could afford this house, proud that he could provide this home for our family. And now our son was trying to take it from me, was claiming I had no right to the life Graham and I had built together. The mortgage documents showed every payment, 30 years of checks written faithfully on the first of every month, even the difficult years, when money was tight, when Graham had been laid off from the manufacturing plant for 6 months, when I'd worked double shifts at the hospital to keep us afloat. We never missed a payment, never been late, never failed in our commitment to this house, to our family's security. The final payment, marked paid in full, was dated March 1st, 2004. 20 years ago, this house had been entirely, completely, legally mine for 20 years. And for the last 6 years, since Graham's death, it had been mine alone. I carefully made copies of everything on the old printer in the basement office area, the one Graham had set up when he'd briefly tried to run a woodworking business from home. The printer was slow, churning out pages one laborious sheet at a time. But I didn't care. Each page was ammunition, evidence, proof of ownership that Marcus couldn't dispute or talk his way around. Next, I went to the safe hidden in the back of our bedroom closet behind the old winter coats I couldn't bring myself to donate because they still smelled faintly of Graham's aftershave. The safe was small, fireproof, containing our most important documents. The combination was our wedding anniversary, 08/14/1959. Inside, I found more treasures. My will, drawn up 5 years ago with Bernard Morrison, my attorney. It specified clearly that the house would be divided equally among my 3 children upon my death, with Shelby having first right of refusal if she wanted to buy out her brothers and keep the house in the family. Marcus would inherit his share, but only after I was gone, and only as one of 3 equal beneficiaries, not the sole owner he apparently imagined himself to be.
There was also a folder of Graham's papers from when his estate had been settled. Death certificate, probate records, the legal transfer of all jointly owned property into my sole name. Crystal clear documentation that I, Eleanor May Whitfield, was the sole legal owner of 847 Oakmont Drive and everything in it. I took photographs of everything with my phone. Shelby's suggestion from years ago when she'd helped me organize important documents. "Digital backups, Mom," she'd said. "Keep copies in the cloud where nothing can happen to them." At the time, I'd thought it was overkill. Now I was grateful for her foresight. By 10 o'clock, I had assembled a complete dossier of ownership, 47 years of documentation proving this house was mine. I organized it all in a new folder, labeled simply Proof, and set it on the kitchen table where I could see it, a tangible reminder that I wasn't crazy, wasn't confused, wasn't making claims I couldn't support. My next call was to Bernard Morrison's office. Bernard had been our attorney for 30 years, had handled Graham's estate, had drawn up my will, had given me legal advice through various life complications. He was in his late 60s now, semi-retired, but still taking calls from longtime clients. "Eleanor Whitfield," his secretary Patricia said warmly when she answered. "We haven't heard from you in months. How are you doing?" "I'm well, Patricia, but I need to speak with Bernard about a legal matter. Is he available?" "Let me check his schedule. Can you tell me what this is regarding?" I hesitated, not wanting to air my family's dirty laundry, but needing help badly enough to swallow my pride. "It's regarding my house, my property rights, and possibly eviction proceedings." There was a pause. "Eviction? Eleanor, are you having trouble with a tenant?" "Something like that. Can Bernard see me today? It's urgent." "Hold, please." Classical music filled my ear while I waited, some piece by Mozart that Graham used to play on Sunday mornings. The memory brought tears to my eyes. Graham would know what to do. He'd always been so good at handling confrontation, at standing firm when I wanted to avoid conflict. I needed his strength now. "Eleanor?" Bernard's voice came on the line, warm and concerned. "Patricia says you need to discuss eviction. What's going on?" I took a deep breath and told him everything. The whole story poured out. 6 months of gradual invasion and manipulation, the confrontation yesterday, Marcus's claim that I owed them for living in my own house, their pressure for me to move to assisted living so they could take over my property. He listened without interrupting, letting me get it all out. When I finally finished, there was a long silence. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger, "what Marcus is doing is called elder abuse. Financial exploitation and coercive control. It's illegal in this state, and it's prosecutable." The words hit me like a physical blow. Elder abuse. I'd heard the term before, worked with patients who had experienced it during my nursing career, but I never imagined it could happen to me. Never thought my own son would be capable of it. "I don't want to prosecute him," I said quickly. "He's still my son. I just want him out of my house. I want my life back." "I understand. We can absolutely help you with that. But Eleanor, you need to understand the seriousness of this situation.
Based on what you've told me, Marcus has been systematically working to establish control over your property and your life. The fact that he's convinced you that you owe him anything is a major red flag. What can I do? How do I get them out? First, I need you to come to my office this afternoon, bring all the documentation you have. We'll need to review everything, make sure your ownership is absolutely clear and documented. Then we'll draft a formal eviction notice. In Massachusetts, even family members living in your home have tenant rights after 30 days, so we need to follow proper legal procedures. My heart sank. How long will that take? If they contest it, which they probably will given their behavior, it could take 60 to 90 days. But Eleanor, we can also pursue a restraining order if you feel threatened or if they're engaging in financial abuse. That could remove them from the property immediately. 90 days. 3 more months of living with their criticism, their takeover of my space, their constant pressure. 3 months of being made to feel like a guest in my own home. I wasn't sure I could survive it. What if I just change the locks? I asked. What if I pack their things while they're out and tell them they can't come back? Illegal eviction. They could sue you and win. They could potentially even claim squatters' rights or adverse possession if this isn't handled correctly. I know it's frustrating, but we need to do this by the book. The law is on your side, Eleanor. Your ownership is clear. But we have to follow the proper procedures. I closed my eyes, feeling defeated. Okay, what time should I come to your office? 2 o'clock. And Eleanor, bring any documentation you have of their financial situation. If Marcus is in debt, if he's been lying about his business success, that context will be important. It establishes motive for the exploitation. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, feeling overwhelmed. This was really happening. I was taking legal action against my own son. The boy I'd rocked to sleep, the child I'd nursed through chicken pox and broken bones, the young man I'd been so proud of when he'd graduated college. Where had that boy gone? When had ambition and greed replaced the values Graham and I had tried to instill? My phone rang, breaking through my dark thoughts. Shelby's name appeared on the screen, my daughter's smiling face in the contact photo. "Mom," she said when I answered, her voice bright and cheerful, "I was just thinking about you. How are things going?"
I almost lied. Almost said everything was fine, the way I'd been doing for months, protecting her from the truth because I didn't want to burden her with my problems. But something in me broke. "Shelby," I said, my voice cracking, "I need help. Marcus and Vivian, I don't know how to. They're trying to take my house." "What?" "Mom, what are you talking about? Slow down. Start from the beginning." And so I told her everything. The second time that morning, I'd unburdened the whole terrible story. Unlike Bernard's professional sympathy, Shelby's reaction was immediate fury. "That absolute bastard," she said, her normally gentle voice harsh with anger. "Mom, why didn't you tell me this was happening? I've been calling you for months and you said everything was fine." I thought I could handle it. I thought maybe I was overreacting, being difficult. Marcus kept saying I needed their help, that I couldn't manage on my own, and I started to believe him. "That's gaslighting, Mom. That's manipulation. Of course you can manage on your own. You're 73, not 93. You're healthy and capable and completely competent. And that house is yours, legally, morally, in every possible way." Hearing my daughter's fierce defense brought tears to my eyes. "I have an appointment with Bernard Morrison this afternoon. He's going to help me evict them. But Shelby, it could take months. I don't know if I can live with them that long." "You're not going to. I'm coming over right now, today, and we're going to document everything they've done, everything they've taken over, every way they've violated your space and your rights. And Mom, I'm calling Robert. He needs to know what Marcus is doing." "Shelby, no, don't bother Robert. He's so far away, and he's busy with work." "Mom, stop.
You're doing that thing again where you protect everyone else at your own expense. Robert loves you. He'd want to know. He'd be furious if he found out later that this was happening and we didn't tell him. She was right. I knew she was right. But years of putting my children's needs before my own were hard to overcome. Okay, I agreed quietly. Call him. Tell him what's happening. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Don't let them intimidate you. This is your house, Mom, your home, and we're going to get it back. After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. And something else, something stronger. I felt angry, righteously, justifiably angry. Not the sad, defeated acceptance I'd been living with, but real fire-in-my-belly rage at what Marcus had done, how he'd manipulated me, how he'd tried to make me doubt my own mind and my own rights. I went to the living room, to that corner where my reading chair had been exiled. Vivian's white leather sectional dominated the space, positioned to look good in photographs, but terrible for actual conversation or comfort. Her decorative pillows were arranged just so. Her expensive throw blanket was draped artistically over one arm. Without overthinking it, I grabbed one end of the sectional and pulled. It was heavier than I expected, but anger gave me strength. I dragged it away from its prominent position, shoving it against the far wall. Then I retrieved my reading chair from the corner, positioning it in its rightful place by the window where the afternoon light was perfect for reading. I stood back, breathing hard from the exertion, looking at my living room reconfigured. It looked like home again, like my space, not some showroom Vivian had staged. Let her say something. Let her complain. This was my house, and I was done apologizing for existing in it. By the time Shelby arrived, I had also reclaimed my kitchen. I'd moved Vivian's expensive cookware to the basement storage, brought my own dishes back to the accessible cabinets, restored my spice rack to its proper place on the counter. My refrigerator was reorganized with my food, my preferences, my choices. Shelby found me in the kitchen, putting the final touches on the reclamation. She took one look at my face, at the determined set of my jaw, and smiled with fierce pride. "There's my mom," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. I knew she was still in there. We spent the next hour documenting everything. Shelby photographed the changes Vivian had made to the house, the areas they'd taken over, the ways they'd erased my presence from my own home. She took video of me explaining what used to be where, how things had been before they'd moved in without permission. "This is evidence of the takeover," Shelby explained. "It shows the systematic way they've tried to establish control and ownership. Bernard will want to see this." At 1:30, we left for Bernard's office, leaving a note on the kitchen table. Went to see attorney, back later. Mom. I wanted Marcus to know, wanted him to understand that his manipulation had consequences, that I wasn't the helpless old woman he'd tried to convince me I was. Bernard's office was in an old Victorian house that had been converted to professional use, all dark wood paneling and built-in bookshelves filled with legal volumes. Patricia greeted us warmly, offering coffee and expressing concern when she saw how stressed I looked. In Bernard's office, surrounded by the smell of old books and lemon furniture polish, I laid out everything: the deed, the mortgage records, the will, the probate documents, my financial statements showing I'd been paying property taxes and insurance all along, that Marcus's claims of supporting the household were exaggerations at best, lies at worst. Bernard reviewed everything methodically, making notes on his yellow legal pad. Shelby sat beside me, her hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze mine, reminding me I wasn't alone.
"Eleanor," Bernard said finally, looking up from the documents, "your ownership is absolutely unassailable. This house is yours, free and clear, with documentation going back 47 years. Marcus has no legal claim whatsoever. The fact that he's been living there for 6 months doesn't change that. So what do we do? I asked. We draft a formal notice to quit. That's the legal term for an eviction notice. We give them 30 days to vacate the premises. If they don't leave, we file for formal eviction through the court. Given the circumstances, given the evidence of financial exploitation and elder abuse, I'm confident we can also get a restraining order that would require them to leave immediately. A restraining order feels so extreme, I said, even as part of me recognized it might be necessary. Mom, Shelby interjected, he told you that you owe him rent in your own house? He's been systematically trying to convince you that you're incompetent and need to move to a nursing home. That's abuse. You need to protect yourself, Mom. Bernard nodded in agreement. Shelby's right. Eleanor, based on everything you've told me, Marcus's behavior meets the legal definition of elder abuse in Massachusetts. Financial exploitation, coercive control, isolation from family, undermining your autonomy, these are all classic warning signs. But he's my son, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I know, Bernard said gently, and that makes this harder, not easier. But being family doesn't give him the right to exploit you. You have to protect yourself, Eleanor. You have to draw this line. I looked at the documents spread across Bernard's desk. 47 years of my life. My marriage to Graham, our children's childhoods, the life we'd built together. All of it threatened by my own son's greed and sense of entitlement. Okay, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Draft the eviction notice and the restraining order, whatever we need to do to get my house back. Bernard smiled, approval in his eyes. Good. I'll have documents ready by tomorrow morning. We'll serve them formally, on the record. And Eleanor, once this process starts, things are going to get uncomfortable. Marcus will likely try to convince you to drop the proceedings, to work it out as family. He may try to make you feel guilty or cruel. You need to stay strong. She won't be alone, Shelby said firmly. I'll be with her. And Robert's flying in this weekend. We've got her back. Leaving Bernard's office, I felt exhausted, but also strangely energized. For months, I'd been reacting, responding, accommodating, trying to keep peace. Now I was acting, taking control, fighting back. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Where's Robert flying in from? I asked Shelby as we drove back to my house. From Seattle. I called him while you were in with Bernard. Mom, he was livid. He couldn't believe what Marcus has been doing. He wanted to fly out tonight, but I told him to wait until the weekend when he could stay longer. I hate putting you kids in the middle of this. You and Robert shouldn't have to choose sides against your brother. We're not choosing sides, Mom. We're standing up for what's right. Marcus put himself on the wrong side when he decided to exploit his own mother. This isn't about siblings against each other. It's about protecting you from someone who's trying to take advantage of you. When we pulled into the driveway, Marcus's Mercedes was already there. My stomach clenched with anxiety. I wasn't ready for another confrontation. But Shelby squeezed my hand. You've got this, Mom. Remember, this is your house. You have every right to be here. They're the ones who should be uncomfortable. We walked in together and immediately heard voices from the living room. Marcus's voice, angry and sharp, and then Vivian's response, equally agitated. Back in the corner where it belongs. Who does she think she is, rearranging everything after we spent weeks getting it perfect? Calm down, Viv. We'll deal with it. She's just being difficult. She'll come around. Shelby and I exchanged glances. They were talking about the furniture I moved, the space I'd reclaimed, and their tone made it clear they viewed it as my transgression, not their years of overstepping. We walked into the living room together. Marcus and Vivian were standing by the repositioned sectional, and they both turned at our entrance. Marcus's expression went from irritated to surprised to something harder when he saw Shelby with me. "Shelby?" he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting my mother," Shelby replied coolly, "which is something you should be doing instead of trying to steal her house." That's a dramatic interpretation of the situation. Vivian interjected. But you don't get to talk. You're not even family. You're Marcus's mistress who helped destroy his marriage, and now you're helping him try to destroy our mother's security. Stay out of this. Vivian's face flushed red, but before she could respond, Marcus stepped forward, his face dark with anger. Don't talk to Vivian that way. She's my partner, and don't act like you know what's happening here. Marcus needs help whether she admits it or not, and we're trying to provide it.
By telling her she owes you rent in her own house? Shelby's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. By trying to force her into assisted living so you can take over her property? That's not help, Marcus. That's exploitation. You don't know what you're talking about. Actually, I do. We just came from Bernard Morrison's office, Mom's attorney. You remember Bernard, don't you? The one who drew up the will that leaves this house equally to all three of us, not just to you? I watched the color drain from Marcus's face. He understood what Shelby was implying. Legal action was coming. The game had changed. Mom, he said, turning to me with that expression of hurt confusion he'd perfected as a child to get out of trouble. What is she talking about? Why were you at a lawyer's office? I took a deep breath, Shelby's presence beside me giving me courage. Because I'm evicting you, Marcus, both of you. I'm taking back my house. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language, like the words couldn't possibly mean what he'd heard. Then he laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. You can't evict us. We live here. We support this household. You need us. No, I said quietly, feeling stronger with each word. You need me. Or more specifically, you need my house because your own life is falling apart. But this ends now. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. 30 days? Vivian's voice was shrill. You're kicking us out with 30 days' notice? Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem, I said, and the words felt both cruel and necessary. You've had 6 months of free housing. That's generous enough. Now you need to leave. Marcus's expression transformed from shock to cold calculation. Fine, if that's how you want it. But Mom, when you're alone in this house, struggling to maintain it, unable to afford repairs, don't come crying to us. You're making a mistake, a big one, and you're going to regret it. He turned and walked out, Vivian following after shooting me a pure eyeglass of hatred. I heard their bedroom door slam, heard angry voices behind it, but I stood my ground in my reclaimed living room, Shelby's arm around my shoulders. You did it, Mom. You stood up to him. I had, but as I sank into my reading chair, the chair that was finally back where it belonged, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. Marcus wasn't the type to accept defeat easily, and a cornered, desperate man was often the most dangerous kind. Whatever came next, whatever Marcus tried, I needed to be ready, because this was my home, and I was done apologizing for defending it. The next morning, Bernard Morrison's office delivered the formal eviction notice by certified mail and process server. I watched through my living room window as a professional-looking woman in a gray suit rang the doorbell at exactly 9 o'clock. Marcus answered, still in his pajamas, clearly not expecting official legal documents to arrive before his morning coffee. I saw his face change as he read the papers, watched the color drain from his cheeks, saw his jaw clench with barely controlled fury. He looked up at the process server, said something I couldn't hear, then slammed the door hard enough that I felt the vibration through the house. Within minutes, he was pounding on my bedroom door. Mom, open this door right now. We need to talk about this. I'd locked it the night before, Shelby's suggestion. Until they're gone, keep your important documents and valuables in your room and keep that door locked when you're not in there. Don't give them any opportunity to take or destroy anything. I'm not discussing this through a door, Marcus. If you want to talk, we can do it in the living room, civilly. Civil? You serve me with eviction papers and want to talk about being civil? You told me I owed you rent in my own house. You tried to force me into a nursing home. Don't talk to me about civility. I heard him breathing heavily on the other side of the door, could picture his face red with anger, fists probably clenched at his sides. The same way he'd looked as a teenager when he didn't get his way, except now he was a grown man with much more at stake.
Fine. Living room. 10 minutes. I took my time getting ready, deliberately making him wait. I dressed carefully in the navy suit I'd worn to Graham's funeral, armor against whatever Marcus was planning to throw at me. I gathered my folder of documents, the proof of ownership that Bernard had helped me organize. Whatever arguments Marcus made, I had facts. Indisputable, documented facts. When I entered the living room, I found Marcus and Vivienne waiting like a tribunal. They had positioned themselves on the sectional again, trying to claim the power position in the room. But I walked calmly to my reading chair by the window, the morning light streaming in, putting them in shadow. Small victories. 30 days, Marcus said, without preamble, holding up the eviction notice. You're giving us 30 days to vacate? Do you have any idea how impossible that is? Finding a new place, packing, moving, all in 30 days? You've had 6 months of free housing, I replied calmly. I think that's generous enough. Besides, you told me you were only staying a few months while your condo was being prepared. Surely after 6 months, that condo must be ready by now? The look that passed between Marcus and Vivienne told me everything. There was no condo. There had never been a condo. It was a lie from the beginning, a story to get their foot in my door and then refuse to leave.
Your strategy of living rent-free in my house while trying to convince me I'm incompetent and should move to assisted living? I kept my voice level, channeling the calm professionalism I'd used as a nurse dealing with difficult patients. That strategy? Vivienne leaned forward, her expression calculated sympathy. Ellie, I think you're misunderstanding our intentions. We've been genuinely concerned about you. This house is too much for someone your age. We were trying to help you see that. By taking over every room, by criticizing everything about my life, by telling me I owe you for the privilege of living in my own home? I shook my head. That's not help, Vivienne. That's conquest. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing the room with aggressive energy. You know what I think? I think Shelby put you up to this. She's always been jealous of my success, always trying to undermine me with you. She probably saw an opportunity to turn you against me and grabbed it. Don't blame your sister for your own actions, I said sharply. Shelby didn't tell you to claim ownership of my house. She didn't tell you to pressure me into assisted living. She didn't tell you to treat me like hired help in my own home. You did all of that yourself. Because you needed someone to push you. You're stuck in the past, Mom, living in this old house, surrounded by old furniture, old memories, refusing to accept that time moves on. Dad's been dead for 8 years. Maybe it's time to let go. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Let go? Let go of your father's memory? Let go of the home we built together? Is that what you think I should do? I think you should be practical. This house is worth $600,000, probably more. That's money you could be using, enjoying, instead of being house poor and struggling to maintain a property that's too much for you. There it was. The truth beneath all the concern and manipulation. Marcus didn't want me to move to assisted living for my well-being. He wanted me to sell the house so he could access the money, either through inheritance or by convincing me to help him with the proceeds. This house isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. When I die, it will be divided equally among you, Shelby and Robert, according to my will. But while I'm alive, this is my home, and my decision about it is final. Equally? Marcus's voice rose an octave. After everything I've done, after 6 months of supporting this household, maintaining this property, I get the same as Shelby and Robert who've done nothing? You've done nothing but mooch off me for 6 months, I corrected. And even that doesn't entitle you to special consideration. You're all my children. You're all equal in my will. That's not changing. Vivienne stood, her mask of sympathy finally slipping to reveal the calculating hardness beneath. You're making a huge mistake, Ellie. Marcus has been protecting you, protecting this house. Without us here, who knows what could happen? This is a big house in a changing neighborhood. Break-ins happen. Accidents happen. Elderly people living alone are vulnerable.
The threat was barely veiled. My blood ran cold, but I refused to show fear. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice steel. "I'm stating facts, unfortunate facts about the risks elderly people face when they insist on living independently against good advice." "Get out," I said, standing from my chair. "Both of you. Out of this room, out of my sight. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live, and I suggest you start looking immediately. Because on day 31, if you're still here, the sheriff will remove you, and everything you've left behind will be considered abandoned." Marcus stood abruptly, taking a step toward me, his face flushed with anger, and for a moment I thought he might actually do something physical. But then he seemed to remember himself, remember that assault charges wouldn't help his situation. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think we can just throw you out? You think this is that simple? Mom, you have no idea what you've started." "I know exactly what I've started. I've started taking back my life. Now get out." They left, but the atmosphere in the house afterwards felt poisonous. I could hear them in their room, arguing in sharp whispers, could feel their presence like a toxic cloud hanging over everything. I called Shelby immediately. "They threatened me," I told her, my hands shaking as I held the phone. "Not directly, but Vivian basically said that elderly people living alone are vulnerable, that accidents happen. Shelby, I'm scared." "That's it," Shelby said decisively. "I'm coming over and I'm staying with you until they're gone. Pack them a bag. They can have their clothes and personal items. I'm getting you a locksmith to change all the locks today." "But Bernard said we have to follow legal procedures." "Bernard said that before they threatened you. Threats change everything. I'm calling him right now. Then I'm calling the police to file a report. Mom, document everything. Write down exactly what Vivian said, word for word, while it's fresh in your memory." After we hung up, I did exactly that. I opened my laptop, the one Graham had bought me 5 years ago, insisting I needed to stay connected with technology, and typed out everything, every word of the morning's confrontation, every threatening implication, every moment of intimidation. As I typed, I heard movement upstairs, footsteps, drawers opening and closing, the sound of something heavy being dragged. What were they doing? I went to the bottom of the stairs, listening. More sounds, more movement. Then Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs, carrying a large cardboard box. "What's in the box?" I asked.
"Our belongings," he said curtly. "Since you're so eager for us to leave, we're starting to pack." But something about his expression, about the way he held the box, made me suspicious. "I'd like to see what's in that box." "No. Marcus, this is my house. I have a right to know what you're removing from it. These are our personal possessions. You have no right to search through our things." He tried to move past me down the stairs, but I blocked his path. We stood there, mother and son, in a standoff that would have been absurd if it weren't so serious. "Open the box, Marcus." "No. Open it, or I'm calling the police right now and reporting theft." He stared at me for a long moment, calculation in his eyes. Then, with exaggerated slowness, he set the box down on the stairs and opened the top flaps. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, in frames and loose. Photos of my family, of Graham and me over the years, of the children growing up, our wedding album, the baby books I'd kept for all 3 children. "Why are you taking family photographs?" I asked, confused. "Because they're mine. My childhood photos, my memories." "Those are copies. The originals are in the albums in my bedroom. You're taking family photos, removing them from this house?" Then it hit me. He was erasing evidence. Evidence that this was my family home, my history, my life. He was trying to make it look like I'd recently moved in, like my claim to long-term ownership was questionable. "Put them back," I said firmly. "All of them. Right now." "They're mine. They're family photographs in my house.
You can take copies after you move out, but right now they stay here. Put the box back upstairs now." We stared at each other, and I saw the moment he decided not to fight this battle. He picked up the box and carried it back upstairs, but his expression promised this was far from over. I immediately called Bernard Morrison. "He's trying to remove family photos, trying to make it look like I haven't lived here long. What else might he be planning?" "Eleanor, this is escalating faster than I expected. I'm going to expedite the restraining order. Can you get to a safe place tonight? Stay with Shelby until we can get them formally removed?" "This is my house. I'm not leaving my house." "I understand, but your safety is important, I know. But Bernard, if I leave, they'll claim abandonment. They'll say I moved out and they're the rightful occupants. I can't give them that opening." Bernard was silent for a moment. "You're right. Okay, here's what we do. I'm filing an emergency restraining order today, citing the threats and the attempted removal of property. With any luck, we can have them removed by tomorrow. But Eleanor, you need someone there with you tonight. Don't be alone with them." "Shelby's coming over. She's going to stay until this is resolved." "Good. And, Eleanor, document everything. Every interaction, every threat, every suspicious action. It's all evidence." Shelby arrived within the hour, her face set with determination. She brought her laptop, a suitcase, and a baseball bat that she set pointedly by the front door. "Just in case," she said when she saw my expression. We spent the afternoon documenting everything. Shelby went through the house with her phone camera, recording every room, every piece of furniture, every valuable item, creating a visual inventory in case Marcus and Vivian tried to claim anything belonged to them or tried to damage property on their way out. In the basement, while documenting storage areas, Shelby made a discovery that changed everything. "Mom," she called up the stairs, her voice strange. "You need to come down here, now." I found her in Graham's old workshop area, standing in front of the filing cabinet that Marcus had clearly been through. Folders were pulled out, papers scattered across the workbench. "Look at this," Shelby said, holding up a document. It was a loan application, in my name, for a home equity line of credit against my house, for $200,000. My hands shook as I took it from her. The application was dated 3 weeks ago. The signature looked like mine, but I'd never seen this document before, never applied for any loan such thing. I vaguely remembered that call, had thought it was a scam attempt, and hung up quickly. "That's why," I whispered, pieces clicking into place. "That's why he's been so desperate to stay here, to convince me to move out. He's been trying to steal equity from my house. If I'd moved to assisted living, if he'd convinced me to give him power of attorney like he kept suggesting, he could have actually gotten this loan. This is fraud. Serious fraud. Mom, we need to call the police right now. This isn't just eviction anymore. This is criminal." We went back upstairs to find Marcus standing in the kitchen, clearly having heard our discovery. His face was pale but defiant. "You were going through my private papers." "Your private papers?" I hold up the forged loan application. "This has my name on it, my forged signature, my house being used as collateral. There's nothing private about this. This is fraud." "You don't understand. I was going to tell you. I needed the money to save my business. I thought if I could just get the loan, get back on my feet, I could pay it back before you even knew about it."
You forged my signature on a loan application for $200,000 and thought I wouldn't notice? I was desperate. His composure cracked completely, years of pretense and lies crumbling. Everything's falling apart. The business, the investments, everything. I'm drowning in debt. Vivian's expenses, the lifestyle I promised her. I can't maintain it. I needed this money. You're my mother. You're supposed to help me. Help you? I stared at him in disbelief. You mean enable you? Enable your lies, your fraud, your complete disregard for anyone but yourself? Marcus, I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. Your father and I sacrificed to give you every opportunity. And this is how you repay us? By trying to steal from me? Shelby was already on the phone with the police. Yes, we'd like to report fraud and attempted identity theft. The victim is a 73-year-old woman. The suspect is her son. Marcus's eyes widened with panic. Mom, don't do this, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll leave right now, today, and you'll never hear from me again. Just don't press charges. You should have thought about consequences before you forged my signature, before you tried to steal from me, before you spent 6 months manipulating and threatening me in my own home. The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers, one older and clearly experienced, one younger and taking careful notes. Marcus tried to charm them, to explain it all as a misunderstanding, but the evidence was damning. The forged signature, the bank's denial based on my verification that I'd never applied, the timeline of manipulation and attempted financial exploitation. Sir, we're going to need you to come down to the station. We have some questions about this loan application and the signature on it. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but we strongly suggest you come voluntarily and answer our questions. Otherwise, we'll be obtaining a warrant. Marcus looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood that I wasn't backing down, that the frightened, manipulated elderly woman he'd been treating like an obstacle to his plans was actually a steel-spined mother who'd finally had enough. Mom, he said quietly, I never meant for it to go this far. I got in over my head, made bad decisions. I thought if I could just get some money, I could fix everything. By stealing from me? By forging my name? By threatening me when I wouldn't comply? I don't even recognize you anymore. The son I raised wouldn't have done these things. The son you raised was taught that success matters, that providing for your family matters, that being strong matters. I was just trying to be successful, trying to be what you and Dad always wanted. We wanted you to be honest, I said, tears streaming down my face now. We wanted you to be kind. We wanted you to have integrity. We never, ever wanted this. As the police led Marcus out to their car for questioning, Vivian grabbed her designer handbag and followed without a word to me. No apology, no explanation, just a cold departure that revealed she'd never cared about anything but what she could get from the situation. After they left, the house felt eerily quiet. Shelby and I stood in the kitchen, exhausted and emotionally drained, trying to process what had just happened. You did the right thing, Mom, Shelby said, wrapping her arms around me. I know it hurts, but you did the right thing. Did I? I sank into a kitchen chair. That's my son, my firstborn. And I just watched the police take him away. He made his choices. You're not responsible for those choices. You're only responsible for protecting yourself, for drawing the line that should have been drawn a long time ago. Bernard Morrison arrived an hour later with a restraining order. Though it seemed redundant now, Marcus was at the police station, likely facing charges for fraud and identity theft. Even if he made bail, he wouldn't be allowed back to my house. Eleanor, I know this is hard, but you've potentially saved yourself from financial ruin. If that loan had gone through, if Marcus had managed to forge enough documents to get power of attorney, you could have lost this house, lost everything. I know, but he's still my son. How do I reconcile that? How do I accept that the baby I held, the child I raised, could grow up into someone who'd do this to me? That's a question I can't answer, he admitted. That's something you'll have to work through, probably with professional help. But Eleanor, what you did today, standing up for yourself, refusing to be victimized, protecting your home and your future, that took tremendous courage. Over the next few days, the truth came out in pieces. Marcus's business had been failing for 2 years. He'd been living on credit cards and borrowed money, maintaining the illusion of success while drowning in debt. The divorce from Claire had been financially devastating. Vivian's expensive tastes had accelerated his decline.
He'd been facing bankruptcy, possibly even criminal charges related to business deals that had gone wrong. My house was his last hope. If he could get me to move out, he'd plan to claim squatters' rights, then forge documents to transfer ownership or at least get a home equity loan to pay off his debts. The threats, the manipulation, the gradual takeover, it had all been calculated steps in a plan to steal my home.
Mom, Robert said when he arrived from Seattle 3 days later, pulling me into a tight hug. I'm so sorry. I should have known something was wrong. I should have visited more, checked in on you more. You have your own life, I told him. I don't expect you to drop everything to babysit your mother. But that's just it. You don't need babysitting. You never did. Marcus created a narrative that you were helpless and declining to justify his takeover. And I believed him. I should have questioned it. The legal process ground forward. Marcus was charged with identity theft, fraud, and attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. The prosecutor told me the case was strong, that with the physical evidence and the pattern of behavior, conviction was likely. Do you want to proceed with prosecution? The district attorney asked me in her office a week later, or would you prefer we offer a plea deal? Given its family, I'll defer to your wishes on how aggressively we pursue this. I thought about it for a long time, about the baby I'd held, the boy who'd once been sweet and loving before ambition and greed had twisted him, the man who'd looked me in the eye and told me I owed him rent in my own house. Proceed, I said finally. He needs to face consequences, real consequences. Otherwise, he'll just do this to someone else someday, maybe another elderly person who doesn't have family to help them fight back. The prosecutor nodded approvingly. We'll pursue the maximum charges then. Given the vulnerability of the victim and the sophistication of the attempted fraud, we're looking at significant prison time if convicted. 2 months later, I sat in a courtroom watching my son plead guilty to reduced charges. 1 count of identity theft, 1 count of attempted fraud. The plea deal meant 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation and mandatory restitution. He'd also have a permanent felony record. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I stood on shaking legs and faced my son across the courtroom. Marcus, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I hope that during your time in prison, you find a way to understand what you did, not just to me, but to yourself. You had so many advantages, so many opportunities. Your father and I gave you everything we could, and you threw it all away for money, for the appearance of success, for greed. I paused, tears streaming down my face. But I want you to know something. When you've served your time, when you've done the work to become a better person, if you genuinely change and show real remorse, my door will be open. Not to move back in, not to have access to my finances, but to rebuild a relationship based on honesty and respect. Because despite everything, you're still my son, and I still love you, but I will never again allow you to take advantage of that love. Marcus was crying too. His expensive suit rumpled from 2 months in county jail awaiting sentencing. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that I understand now what I did, what I became, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone you could be proud of again. Whether he meant it, whether he could actually change, only time would tell. 3 months after the trial, I was sitting on my back porch on a beautiful spring morning, drinking coffee and watching the birds at the feeder Graham had built. The house was peaceful. Mine again. Shelby visited regularly, bringing my grandchildren for Sunday dinners. Robert called every week from Seattle, planning a visit for the summer. My reading chair was back in its place by the living room window. My kitchen held my dishes, my spices, my preferences. My routines were my own again. The house felt like home. Dorothy, my neighbor, came over with fresh muffins and settled into the other porch chair. "How are you doing? Really?" she asked, studying my face. "Better," I said honestly.
Some days I still can't believe it all happened, that my own son tried to steal my house, but mostly I feel free, like I've reclaimed not just my home, but myself. You're stronger than you knew, Dorothy observed. A lot of people would have backed down, would have let him get away with it rather than face the conflict. I almost did, I admitted. For months, I let him convince me that I was the problem, that I was too old, too difficult, too much of a burden. I started believing I didn't deserve to live in my own home on my own terms. But you didn't believe it in the end. You fought back. I did. I smiled, feeling sunshine on my face. And I won. That evening, I sat at my laptop and began typing. Other elderly people needed to know they weren't alone, that financial exploitation by family members was more common than anyone wanted to admit, that standing up for yourself was possible no matter your age. I told my story, every painful detail, and I ended with this. If you're experiencing something similar, if family members are treating you like you're incompetent or like your home and resources belong to them, please know this. You have rights. You have value. You have agency. Your age doesn't diminish your right to dignity and autonomy. Your home is yours. Your life is yours. And you have every right to defend both, even against people you love. Get help. Talk to an attorney. Document everything. Reach out to adult protective services if you need to. Don't let shame or guilt or fear of family conflict stop you from protecting yourself, because the people who truly love you won't ask you to sacrifice your security and well-being for their benefit.
I'm 73 years old. I stood up to my son. I took back my house. And if I can do it, so can you. I posted my story online, shared it in elder advocacy groups, sent it to local senior centers. Within days, I started receiving responses. Dozens, then hundreds of messages from other elderly people who'd experienced similar situations. Many were still trapped, afraid to act. Others had successfully fought back and wanted to share their stories of victory. I became an advocate, speaking at senior centers, working with legal aid organizations, helping other elderly people understand their rights and find resources. Graham's death had left a hole in my life that I'd tried to fill with being useful to my children. Now I'd found a better purpose, being useful to people who genuinely needed help, who weren't trying to exploit me, but who valued my experience and wisdom. 6 months after Marcus's sentencing, I received a letter from him in prison. It was long, rambling, filled with apologies and explanations and what seemed like genuine remorse. He'd been going to therapy, participating in programs, trying to understand how he'd become someone capable of hurting his own mother. I wrote back, not absolving him, not promising immediate reconciliation, but leaving the door open for the future. Because that's what mothers do, even when our children break our hearts. We hope they'll become better. We believe in their capacity for growth. We love them, even when they make it almost impossible to do so. But I also set clear boundaries. He could write. I would respond, but rebuilding trust would take years, not months. And some things had changed forever. He would never have access to my finances, never have a key to my house, never be allowed to make me feel small or incompetent or burdensome again. I was Eleanor Whitfield, 73 years old, owner of 847 Oakmont Drive in Maplewood Heights, survivor, fighter, mother, grandmother, advocate, woman who'd learned that you're never too old to stand up for yourself, never too old to demand respect, never too old to take back your life. And as I sat on my porch that evening, Graham's wind-up clock ticking steadily in the house behind me, I realized something important. I hadn't just kept my house, I'd kept my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live life on my own terms. And that was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Now I want to hear from you, the people who followed my story to the end.
Have you ever experienced something similar in your own family? Have you watched elderly relatives be manipulated or exploited by people who should be protecting them? What would you do in my situation? Drop a comment below telling me what you think, and don't forget to share this story with anyone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we need reminding that we're stronger than we think, that age doesn't equal helplessness, and that standing up for ourselves is always the right choice, even when it's the hardest one. Thank you for being here with me on this journey. Thank you for caring enough to hear my story all the way through. And if you're facing something similar right now, please know you're not alone. Help is available, and you deserve better than to be made to feel like a burden in your own home. Stay strong, stand firm, and never ever let anyone convince you that you owe them something that's rightfully yours. This is Eleanor Whitfield, signing off from my front porch in my house, living my life on my own terms, and it feels absolutely wonderful.